Hello, everyone. This is Ariana Candell, and I'm here with Linda Buzzell for the first of the Visionary Ecotherapists webinar series. And I'm really happy that you're here with us. We're happy to be here with you. And tonight, in a couple of minutes, I will be interviewing Linda about the future of ecotherapy, about how to work in the level that's in good relationship with the land, and to talk about eco-resiliency, and then there'll be even more, but that's a kind of a start. So I welcome everyone that is here from, first of all, from California, my state, and also all over the country. We also have some folks from Canada, someone from Australia, and someone from Greece, and possibly some other folks who snuck in at the end who I don't know where they're from, but welcome everyone. I'm glad you're here. So this talk tonight is going to be aimed at folks who have been in the field and new folks. It's going to be a little bit of each. So if you are already practicing ecotherapy or nature-based work, there'll be one level that this will come into you at. And if you're new and this is a whole another field that you really haven't explored much or read much about, that's fine too. We welcome, how you will receive it and what it will give to you. So it's kind of going to be a wide range of who we're talking to tonight. So we're glad you are all here. And let's see, at the end, about 10 to 7, we'll have time for questions and answers. So if you want to, if you have questions along the way, you can type them in on screen if you're online, and you can, hold them for the questions and answers, or we'll open the phone lines at the end too. So feel free to, ask whatever questions you can, and we will, we'll be getting to as many as we can along at the end. Okay, so before I introduce Linda, I want to lead us all in a centering and grounding experience, meditation. And so I encourage you to find yourself comfortably in your chair or couch or wherever you are on the floor, and begin to turn inward, soften your eyes, close your eyes, whatever feels right for you. And this meditation is inspired by the winter in California, though it's not as tough as most of you folks in the winter. It's still hard for us Californians to get outside as much as we did in the spring and summer. So I want to kind of lead you in a way of connecting with the land around you, even if you're inside. So first of all, let yourself become aware of the bottoms of your feet. Even feel them kind of opening up energetically and beginning to be aware of what kind of land is below you, even if it's many floors down or even if it's close. So tune into, is that land below you rocky, muddy, sandy, foresty? And begin to kind of extend your awareness towards the ground below you. And feel yourself almost like you're touching it with your feet. And let yourself feel your body and your awareness kind of settling as you feel your connection with this ground around where you live. And also just become aware of that ground. What is it connected to? Is it connected to a hill near you, a plain, a mountain, near a stream or lake? And just kind of extend your awareness along the ground to around where you're living. And if it's in the city where there isn't much open ground, then imagine what the ground is like beneath that concrete, or what it was like, and know that it is there. It goes on hundreds and hundreds of feet, so you can feel into it. And now begin to sense what other natural elements are around you, outside your walls and outside your windows. Are there trees grasses, water, mountain. You begin to kind of imagine in your mind's eye what is around where you live. And begin to feel yourself connecting with that in your imagination, through your energy. And feel not just in front of you, but the sides of you, behind you, all around you. What is around where you live? And again, for folks, if you're deep in the heart of a city and there's lots of buildings around, just why don't you call in what you would like to be around you, what you would want to feel in relationship to. And amidst all of those kind of living plants, also there is air to connect with, clouds, breezes. So there may be snow. So let yourself feel those elements as well and how those feel to be in relationship with them, because probably most of you have much relationship with all of this that's around you when you're outside. And lastly, also imagine and feel into the animals that live near you, birds, squirrels, raccoons, snakes, lizards, insects, bats, whatever they are. And just acknowledge and sense them around you where you're living as well. And then take a few more moments, if you haven't already, and just extend some gratitude to all that is living and supporting you, supporting your oxygen, supporting you under your feet, supporting you in beauty and sound, and all of your senses for food. And staying with your eyes closed if you're open to that, or staying inward. I'm going to read you a poem that kind of inspires me about the new year and about inspiring. I hope it inspires you to kind of take another step in whatever you're on the edge of doing in this new year. It's by Kai Siedenberg, a good friend of mine and colleague, and it's called What Are You Waiting For? What powerful seeds lie dormant deep within you, longing to break through the surface and reach their slender stems towards the light? What tender buds are swelling inside you, yearning to unfurl their radiant petals and reveal their breathtaking beauty? What fruits are ripening, longing to share their sweet nectar? What songs and stories are swirling deep within your breast? What wild and magical dreams are stirring your soul? What are you waiting for, dear one? The world is hungry for your beauty, calling you to bring forth your deepest gifts. The seeds have been patient for so long, waiting for just a few drops of rain, a few rays of sun, a few kind words. Don't deny them that. Don't wait until it feels safe to break open. That day may never come. So taking a few breaths, noticing anything that is stirring within you from that, and knowing that you can continue that inquiry as we talk about this work and in your life in the next several days. So beginning to transition yourself to your eyes open, kind of looking outward a little bit more in your prefrontal cortex of your brain. We're going to start talking about more academic kinds of things. Okay, so I'm hearing, I apologize, we had a little extra background noise here, and that should be done at the moment. So anyway, I'm here with Linda Buzzell. She's actually you're in Santa Barbara, right, Linda?
I am.
You are, hi. Okay, so she's down in Santa Barbara. I'm up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I chose to interview Linda because she is, I think she is amazing. Oops, got some sound over there on Linda's end, a major pioneer and visionary in this field of ecotherapy. And wow, extra sound there. Linda, you okay over there?
I'm fine.
Okay, I don't know, there's a lot of noise on the line there. Okay, so anyway, I have known her for many years. I was super inspired by her book that she and Craig wrote many years ago. And I'm going to tell you a little bit about her, and then we're going to talk to her. So here it is. She has been a psychotherapist for more than 30 years. She specialized in ecopsychology and ecotherapy since 2000. And as I just said, she and Craig edited the book Ecotherapy, Healing with Nature in Mind, and it is a core text in the clinical psychology field. Very much influenced me. So, let's get her picture on here. There you go, Linda. There she is, if you haven't seen her. Sweet picture in her permaculture garden. And she's also a member of the editorial board of Ecopsychology. It's a peer-reviewed journal of the field. And she is an adjunct faculty at the Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara. And she was also a keynote speaker at the 2014 Ecotherapy Symposium at the University of Brighton in the UK. She'll talk a little bit about that later. She's written over 75 blog posts on ecopsychology at the Huffington Post, and in 2006, she received her permaculture design certificate with her husband, Larry, and she created a food forest around her home that served as her ecotherapy office, or still serves, I'm not sure. So anyway, Linda, you have been in the field for more than 15 years. You're at the forefront, and I would love to hear what you think is coming in the next decade. What's happening in the field?
Well, I think we're in a really exciting phase of the development of ecotherapy. And interestingly, this phase is being driven by research. And if any of you are following we have a Facebook group called the Ecotherapy Network where people post new information, new stories about what's going on in ecotherapy. You'll see that almost daily we're getting more and more studies showing, how important it is for people to be connecting with nature and how healing that is. And in fact, the January issue of the National Geographic is all about nature and healing. So we're kind of going mainstream is what's happening. And I think this is a really important time for anyone interested in the field. Originally, ecotherapy was seen as the combination of ecology plus psychotherapy, but I think we're about to go way beyond that because now we're starting to get medical doctors, all kinds of medical professionals, public health people, even social wellness and, more broad concerns. Everybody's sort of realizing that this research is indicating that nature connection is absolutely critical and that we have to move forward with it in many, many different ways. My own theory is that ecotherapy is going to become the tail that wags the dog in terms of ecopsychology as a whole. And this is, we have to be careful as this field explodes that, it goes in the right direction. So I know you and I are going to be talking about that.
Yeah, we will. I will ask you a question right after this one. It sounds so great when you say this. It's so inspiring, and I'm sure everyone on this line is greatly hoping that this is truly happening. This is what I see, too. There's just so many articles in it, and it's just becoming in more and more venues that once, people see it. So that is wonderful. So can you tell us a little bit about what's happening in the UK? Because I know they did a huge study there several years ago at Essex, and I know they have doctors that are prescribing nature. They have, it's a huge governmental kind of push. So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Well, starting in, I think it was 2005, the University of Essex began doing a lot of very interesting studies about the effects of a walk in green nature in the treatment of some mental health conditions. And the results were so powerful that they really began to shake up the National Health Service, which, of course, the UK has single-payer health care. And people taxpayers obviously were paying for a larger and larger amount of psychiatric drugs for depression. And this research showed that these walks in nature were as effective an antidepressant for mild to moderate depression as antidepressant medication, and of course have nothing but positive side effects. So that was really an eye-opener, and I think people at the National Health Service started to say, wait a minute, why are we paying for these drugs when we could be using ecotherapy? And then basically they began to ask, well, okay, let's hire some ecotherapists to do this work. And of course, at that point, there weren't many, and they weren't trained yet. So now there's been a whole movement in the UK towards beginning to train people to do the work. And there's a book by Dr. Martin Jordan called Nature and Therapy that came out, and he's at the University of Brighton. And they've been, doing some pioneering work there, which I think is very helpful. And he and a colleague are going to be coming out with a new book in the spring from Paul Grave Macmillan that's called Ecotherapy Theory, Research, Theory, and Practice. So a lot of exciting things are happening in the UK, and I'm hopeful they're going to be leading the way.
Wonderful. Yeah, I'm very impressed with what I've heard that they're doing. It seems like because they have the government behind them more, it seems like the wave is a lot stronger than here so far. But do you think we're going to catch up? Is there any place that you think that will kind of catalyze this in the United States?
I think it is going to catch up. I don't know when, but I think that the research is what's driving all of this. And that, more and more, both within mental health and physical health and other areas, people can't ignore the fact that nature connection is profoundly healing in many, many ways.
Yeah, I think I'll, myself and everyone on this call again probably would say yes. How could you not think that? But we need to spread the word, and that's part of my vision of wanting to do these webinars and offer them for free. As I want the word to get out to more and more people that these things are happening, and that sometimes it takes a while for a book to get out, and I know there's some work that we'll talk about later with you that not in the book yet, but it's powerful, very important work. So that's another reason I wanted to interview you and other folks to kind of get the dialogue happening quicker. So we just have another minute or so. Can you just name like one or two things happening in Japan or Korea, and then we'll go on to another question.
Well, I'm certainly not an expert in the research on Japan and Korea, but I'm aware that some of the cultures in Asia, with their foundation in Taoism and nature connection, seem to be moving ahead very quickly. The whole idea of forest bathing is getting very strong, and it's a new thing with that name, but of course it's a very ancient tradition in some Asian countries. That deep connection with the rest of nature. And, of course, again, it's the scientific research that's happening that's driving it right now, where they're realizing that forest bathing is profoundly healing.
That's one of my favorite studies. There's several of those studies, but that people's cortisol levels go down, their blood pressure levels go down, their heart rates go down, and they also, their well-being and happiness levels go up. So
yes,
that's
exactly.
concrete, physiological changes in those studies. So people, as we're kind of covering a lot of ground today. So if you have any interest in any of these topics that we have only kind of touched on, you can, Google them. They're all out there. So I'm going to move on to the next question. So basically, again, I know I've said it several times. Most folks who are on the line here today, I'm sure, have a deep love of nature, and they, we're sharing it with our families, our friends, it's, we have probably a lot of gratitude and relationship with a reciprocal piece, with nature, as opposed to just going out and taking things from nature. That's part of the industrial culture. So, I know one of the things you're worried about is that if this goes, mainstream, that people are going to go at the relationship with nature as a one-sided situation, and then here we are back in the, abusing nature as opposed to respecting in the relationship part. So can you tell us a little bit about your 2 levels of ecotherapy that you believe are important, and what are some of the implications for those, particularly aspiring to level 2?
Yes. Well, what I call level 1 ecotherapy is sometimes the first thing that happens, where people get all excited about the fact that nature connection is healing in these many different ways, and they really see it almost as a commodity, or just one more instance where we just use nature for our own health or our own benefit without really thinking about the health of nature. And level 2 is the idea that we have to have a circle of reciprocal healing, that it's not enough to just, use our nature connection so we feel good and not really care about what's happening to the rest of nature and how much suffering there actually is going on right now with our endangered, ecosystems and animals and plants.
Mhm. Yeah. I agree. So how do we besides gratitude, which I spoke of earlier, how do you think people can kind of be more reciprocal? Do you have some ideas?
Well, I think the most important thing is to basically do our own work in terms of having a nature connection practice ourselves, and also getting into a deeper relationship with nature. And of course, that's different for different people. I don't think ecotherapy is a one-size-fits-all situation. I mean, some people relate to gardens, other people are deeply moved by more wild areas. Some people are very connected with animals. But however we connect with nature, to really just consciously make it almost like a moral duty to open our minds to asking how the other entity is doing, just the way we would if we meet a person. How are you? Mm-hmm. How is my garden doing? How is this wild area, this park, these animals? How are you? So that it becomes a two-way dialogue going on between us and the rest of nature. And yes, of course, this will do us a world of good, but we also hope that it's going to do good for whoever, whatever we're connecting with.
Mm-hmm. I know that, in our state, and I'm sure all over the country, they have a lot of kind of clean up the shoreline day and restore the park day and such. And I love doing that when my children were small, and I know that it's, there are big community events that do that. And so that's like one little way that I've experienced and other people have around me. Also, you said that, it's a good idea to be in dialogue with park department, when we talk, that to ask the park what they need, or, how you can serve, or, what is going on, so that there can actually be a concrete dialogue with the particular needs of particular places. So I want to just add that in there.
Exactly.
So thank you for that. There's a lot more we could say, but I want to go on, if that's all right, to the next one. So I'm going to read a quote from one of your Huffington Post articles. It was in February last year. You wrote, "Psychology also mostly ignores humanity's psychologically dysfunctional relationship with nature that results in the ecocidal behavior that is causing global catastrophe. In spite of abundant scientific information about the shocking effects of human actions on planetary ecosystems, few psychologists concern themselves with the task of helping us understand or change that behavior." So I would love to hear from you. Why do you think our psychological field and other fields, not just that one, have kept people so separated from the earth?
This is a really big question, and I think I'll start with psychology and the social sciences just because, speaking from my own training when I became a therapist, the whole focus was on human relationships with other humans. And there was never any discussion of the rest of nature or the fact that we were deeply integrated into that nature. And I think it's still very difficult for people in psychology and the social sciences to even consider that there could be a relationship with the rest of nature that needs to be considered, and that we have to take into account the context that we're in. And we've almost been blinded that we can only perceive what's going on with other people.
Mhm. Mhm. Yeah, I think that, we have some folks that are on the line that may have been trained in the last several years, and there may be little mentionings. We have, some programs here and there. I know there's some programs around the country that are actually specifically teaching ecopsychology, ecotherapy as part of psychotherapy, but it's still pretty small. So it's just, it's just hasn't gotten into the studies, the graduate studies yet, or the undergraduate studies much yet. So that's a big area I see a lot of room for growth in, that, those of us who are educated and practicing in these fields to find ways to bring it to the students that are studying, so they can start with this awareness of including the natural world as part of one's basic health and healing from the very beginning. Yeah.
I think also it's important for people to know that in many programs, it's the students that are driving the change.
Mm-hmm.
So for any of you who are listening who are students, speak to your teachers, speak to your advisors, and tell them you want to go in this direction. Mm-hmm. And let's see if they open up to being that willing for you to take a wider view of what's going on.
Mm-hmm. That's great, and I actually am hearing, more and more students that they're like, well, let us find out more about this. So that's hopeful, but there's a long way to go. So let's move on to another place that the psychological field is not bringing in the awareness of the earth. So why do you think therapists aren't talking about environmental trauma in their trauma workshops? Why is this, again, focused on humans? Do you think it's because that's just the main trend and they haven't seen the wider circle that the natural environment is part of our health, or do you think there's something else going on?
Well, I went to a workshop not too long ago on trauma, and the entire workshop, which was excellent, again, only dealt with human relationships and what goes on inside of people and what goes on between people in terms of trauma. And it was almost like a blind spot. Like, how can anybody working in trauma these days not be aware that so much of our trauma situations, including our refugees, is to do with environmental trauma? And I think it's going to be harder and harder for people to have this very strange blinders on and keep this up, because it's obvious that environmental trauma, unfortunately, is a fact of life in our world today. And those who deal with trauma, who are trained to deal with trauma, have to be ready to also help people and animals and places deal with environmental trauma.
Mm-hmm. Well, in my classes that I have taught online to students all around the world, one was from Texas and one was from Australia, and they were having that environmental trauma as we were in the class, and they were, we were discussing. So how do they, help this community? How do they begin? And one of the things you told me about was that when in Santa Barbara, when you had the oil spill, that you did a community grief ritual. So perhaps you can share a little bit about that, because that is a perfect example of what we can do as healers and therapists.
What was interesting was that right after the oil spill happened, the whole community was really upset. And, there was a political rally that was held, but it was sort of oblivious of any emotional reactions that might be going on. And I remember seeing a reporter asking a question at this political rally, and there were tears rolling down her face. It was as though the environmental activists had no training or understanding that psychological trauma was part of the environmental trauma. So a few of us got together and we did an eco-grief ritual at the beach and invited the whole community to attend. And it was small, but it was really very emotional, where people could come and they could express their grief and their upset about what had happened. I mean, we've had oil spills before here, and for whatever reasons, we've not solved the problem yet. And there just needed to be somewhere where people could go and actually process the emotions and get to a better place. The idea wasn't that they would, stay in that place, but that we would process our emotions enough that we could actually get back into action and continue to go forward, because environmental activism can be very psychologically draining and discouraging. So we need to support each other on a psychological and a community level.
I just want to mention the work of Joanna Macy here, because I've done some studying with her, and she does a really great job of having many exercises that are very translatable and easily used in groups, because one of her main pieces is that we need to do this work in groups. It's too overwhelming. It's too devastating to do alone. We really need to be in community and help each other hold the grief and the trauma of what's happening to different areas on the earth. And so if you haven't heard of Joanna Macy, definitely look her up. And she has a book that's called, Coming Back to Life. That's her, I think, most recent one, and that's one that it's open source. She says people can bring it into their work, so I encourage you to do that. But she also likes you to read the whole book before you do it, and I totally encourage that, or to do some of the exercises on your own first. So again, wow, there's just so much to talk about, but I'm going to move on to the next question.
Let me just throw something in here before we do that. I just wanted to highly recommend Joanna Macy's new book, Active Hope. Because that, for anyone who is feeling discouraged or whose clients are feeling discouraged by the current environmental situation, she's just a wonderful guide in terms of, how we can deal with this in a constructive way.
Thank you. Yeah, and isn't that book more particularly for activists in a way, or do you think it's pretty much it will support anyone who's feeling a little bit of a lack of hope?
Yeah, I think it's for everyone.
Okay, I wasn't sure. Yeah. So many of us listening online are therapists or work with individuals, and so I'm wondering, how do you think we can bring it into the office? How can we bring it into, the one-to-one in a way that, isn't manipulating the client, the client, or overwhelming them? Can you give us a little sense of how you see that?
Obviously, we don't want to be preaching to anyone. What I usually do is ask certain questions that open the door for people to talk about their relationship with various aspects of the rest of nature. Like what is their relationship with nature? How do they remember a place or an animal or an area from when they were small that really touched them? Where do they live now? What's their relationship with nature in that place? Just kind of finding out what their feelings are about the rest of nature. And as I said, it's never a one-size-fits-all situation. Sometimes that's not where I want to go with a client, depending on what the presenting problem is. But other times people will really open up, and there's a lot of emotion and a lot of concern about these issues, and that's an opening for us to talk about all of that.
I think that's a wonderful way of explaining how to do it. And in one of my classes, we have ecotherapy assessment interview questions that we aren't taught in our training, but that, makes sense, just like the ones you said, like what was your relationship to nature growing up? Or, is there a favorite place you go to for your own calm and peace? Just naming the subject then, brings it into the room and makes it, gives more permission for it to be talked about and then discussed as, self-care and then also, to hear about the pain of what people are feeling, because there's such a taboo in our society of not talking about the pain and grief of what's going on. And again, that's why Joanna Macy's work is so wonderful, because that's, a lot of what her work is making room for. So, you also, you said that nature can be our guide, kind of the biodiversity as a model. Can you say a little more about that?
Well, I just wanted to add that in our book, Ecotherapy, Healing with Nature in Mind, there's a chapter that I wrote on asking different questions in therapy that people might want to take a look at. In terms of nature being our guide, one thing I think is really important that we have to deal with, both in the environmental movement and also in ecopsychology and ecotherapy, is that we don't have enough diversity, cultural diversity. And, of course, polycultures are nature's way. So I think that social justice issues about racism, exclusion, all of that, we have to deal with that as part of our ecotherapy practice. So I just invite us all to open the doors as wide as we can when we're doing this work.
Mm-hmm. Yes, thank you. I had a little tech issue here, so I'm back. Sorry about that. Well, I want to say something for folks who are, maybe beginning to consider bringing clients outside or bringing more of nature pieces into their office or bringing in some of these assessment questions. I just want to name some of how we have conceptualized it in the groups that I've been teaching. Is that as, ecotherapists, or having that as one of our specialties, one of the most important things that I think influences our clients and people around us is that we have a consistent, ongoing practice of connection with nature. And you said that earlier, Linda, and I just have seen it in my students and myself. The more that I live every day, moment to moment practically, in that connection, then I see it, I ask about it, I wonder about it with people. It comes into the room, I hear it in what they say. So that's what would be a recommendation that I have to everyone listening. If you want to do this work and be inspiring to people, is to find whatever nature practices work for you, and really do them often, so that it's really living in you, and your images and your metaphors inside and your inspirations are part of that, and that's going to just come through. People will pick it up. The second thing that I think is so important, and partly why we're doing this webinar series, is that we need community to do this, because the media and most of the mainstream culture is saying buy this, buy that. It's not saying hug a tree. It's not saying appreciate the food you're eating. It's not saying these to go out and ask wisdom of a great grandmother tree. It's just not saying that. So we have found that it's just so supportive, healing, inspirational to be with others that are doing this work, and to have some kind of an ongoing situation in that way. So those are two big things I want to encourage you to find and do. And then the last one, of course, is learn about how you can bring specific techniques into the work that you do. And there's lots of books, there's online practices, there's groups, and there's training programs. And so I just changed the slide. And Linda has one coming up, and I have a couple coming up too. So can you tell us a couple sentences about your training program, Linda, so that in case anyone is interested and lives close enough or not, they find a way to get to you?
Sure. This is going to be at Pacifica Graduate Institute in Santa Barbara on a weekend starting on Friday, I think it's May 15th. And basically it's an overview of the field of ecotherapy and how it can be practiced And I call it the multiple ecotherapies because there's lots and lots of different ways of practicing this. So we'll talk about research. We'll talk about the many ways of practicing both indoors and outdoors. I just think I'm hoping to give a real overview of the field for anyone who would like to kind of absorb that information.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Linda. Yeah, and I know you got rave reviews for your last training that you did there. So I wish you well with that. And as you can see online, if you are online, if you're not, I'll tell you what's there, and I'll send you something tomorrow. I have an online ecotherapy training and certificate program. It starts at the end of January, and there's a link that you can go to. And basically, it's a kind of a beginning level, but very practical-oriented class. And so there's readings, there's webinars, 10 different webinars of all different aspects of ecotherapy. There is homework that you need to do that's actually taking somebody outside, that asking the ecotherapy questions, trying out indoor ecotherapy with different nature objects in your office or whatever. And then we have discussions where we, talk about what's working and what it isn't, and, we get you out there actually doing it. So that's coming up in January, and I have a $100 discount if you sign up by Saturday, so that's my marketing. And then if you're in the San Francisco Bay Area or you're, within a couple hours, I have another 4-month program. It's just 4 different weekends starting in March. And that is similar to the online training, but we're actually going to be on the land. So we're going to be reading, learning, doing the webinars, but practicing it with each other and giving live feedback, et cetera. So those are both listed there. I'll send them tomorrow if you have interest. It would be wonderful to have you, and I'm always happy to talk to anybody who's interested, any questions you have about if it's a good fit for you or, what would be next for you. So anyway, enough of the marketing. That's the marketing piece. We're going to go on to talking about your article that you and Craig recently published, and I just saw that people can access it free, which I'm so happy about, from January 11th to February 1st. So it's called The Long Emergency, How to Prepare People for Rapid Environmental Changes. So can you tell us a little bit about that article?
Well, Craig Chalkwist and I edited a special issue of Ecopsychology Journal, and starting next Monday, as you mentioned, people can go to the Ecopsychology Journal and be able to read the whole issue. So it's not just an article by Craig and I. There's a lot of articles that you can read, and we really wanted to look into this whole issue of what will be the job for people who are trained in ecopsychology and ecotherapy as, we're dealing more and more with climate emergencies, other environmental emergencies. Mm-hmm. And what we basically came to is the idea that, in a way, both psychological and practical emergency-trained people, especially those with training in trauma, helping with trauma, that we are going to become first responders, just the way that, we put together our little eco-grease workshop that we did at the beach after our oil spill here, that perhaps more and more people with this training, with this interest, are going to find themselves called upon in their communities to be part of the team of first responders. Mm-hmm. I don't know how many of you have gone through these kinds of things. It's happening everywhere, all around the world, whether it's droughts or storms or rivers that are getting contaminated and spoiled. I mean, there's almost nowhere anymore that has not had one of these things happen, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. And I think that we ecotherapists have a role to play in helping our communities. Mm-hmm.
It makes so much sense, Linda, and it's so great that you kind of made that conceptualization of it. And when I was talking to Craig, who I'll be interviewing next month, I said, well, how do people get training for this? And he said, it needs to be created. So there's an opportunity for people out there who are teachers and trainers and have, some of this ecotherapy experience to create a program that would, be phenomenally supportive of people all over the country and all over the world. So that's a wonderful program just waiting to be created, unless you've heard of one, Linda. I haven't heard one yet.
I haven't, but I think also that we need to reach out, which is what we ended up doing here. We have to reach out to fire departments, police departments, the people that run our city councils, all of the people who are already doing this kind of work. And many of them have no idea that we might be available to help or what we could offer. So we need both the training and we need to just get brave, which is what we tried to do. Is we just told them, you need us. People are hurting in this community, and you need us. We can help.
Wonderful. Yeah, what I think is so exciting and what's been so satisfying about this field is that, there is so much room for innovation and growth and creativity, and there's so much need. So, there's just a lot that each of us can, kind of create and offer. So I just want to encourage all you listening, like the poem that I read, do it. Go for it. Yeah. So so I hope many of you read those articles. I can't wait until Monday when they're available. And I'm going to ask a couple more questions here because we're getting towards the end. So you and Craig have also created a whole piece of work called 20 Principles of Eco-Resilience, Personal and Cultural Adaptation to a Changing Planet. So can you give us a definition of eco-resilience, and then we'll talk about a couple of the aspects of it?
Well, maybe we should start with the word resilience, which is a kind of a popular buzzword right now within psychology, as we're beginning to realize that, the ability to kind of survive the different slings and arrows of whatever goes on in our lives is a really important thing, and that we can learn how to be more resilient psychologically. And by putting eco in front of it, we're just really saying, how can both individuals and communities be resilient in the face of the environmental crises that we're dealing with? So we tried to come up with different ways that both individual people, families, and communities can take action to become more what we call culturally eco-resilient. We're not talking about necessarily the practical survival issues, although obviously I'm a permaculture person, so I'm really into those as well. But sort of the ones that haven't been talked about enough, in my opinion, the ideas of cultural resilience and eco-resilience.
It reminds me of an article I heard on, a radio station here that was talking about some of the people, the culture in Haiti was super resilient with their singing and their community activism and all coming together. And, if we had some of the challenges they had, I don't know that would happen in our culture. I hope it would. But so anyway, that's just what struck me. So one of the things that you wanted to talk a little bit about is the number 17, developing a deep appreciation of human culture, preserve, learn from, and expand the humanities. So how does that help with eco-resiliency?
Well, people don't necessarily think that those things are helpful, but what you mentioned there, the spirit of people dancing and singing and the arts and all of that it's critical that we keep our spirits up when we're dealing with all of this. It makes us healthier. It makes us more effective. So appreciating the arts within human culture and creativity and just the things that make life worthwhile, I think are a super important part of eco-resilience.
That's that feels really good to hear that. Maybe take a really deep breath. So thank you. That's great to remember. What about the next one, number 5, replacing monoculture with polyculture, welcome in who and what has been silenced. Say a little bit more about how that can help in eco-resiliency.
Well, I don't think we can do this by being divided amongst ourselves. I think that, again, as I was saying before, nature abhors a monoculture and loves polyculture. So we really need to kind of look around and ask ourselves, who isn't here? and who do we need to invite in, who do we need to consider. And there's some great work being done by Paloma Buzzell and Carl Anthony. And if you go to Ecopsychology Journal, which you can get for free starting next Monday, you can read the articles. They wrote a wonderful article about how important social justice issues and anti-racism issues are in terms of the future of ecopsychology. And I would just encourage everyone to take a look at that. And I also think that those of us in the white community need to really heal from some of the racism that is still within each of us without, beating ourselves up or doing anything like that. We really need to look very deeply at ourselves, at our own privilege, and we need to just do our part in overcoming this so that we can have a true polyculture where everyone's talents can be contributed to our, the survival of humanity and the rest of the planet.
Yes, thank you. I'm really glad that that's one of your principles, because I know I'm guilty of it myself, and I'm sure others of us listening are too, that sometimes we get caught in, the connection and beauty of nature and this and that, and I forget that, there's people in parts of my city who are being polluted because they live near the wharf, because that's where the less expensive housing are, and they don't have enough say in, their children getting asthma and this and that. So there's a lot of work to be done with equity and us working with folks from all different cultures so that there is more of a sharing of the positive parts of the natural world, and also justice done with some of the parts that are being polluted and toxic and such.
Exactly.
Yeah. So a lot to say there. I'm glad that that's in the Ecopsychology article. So the last of the principles that I want to ask you about today, and I'll ask Craig about some next month, so we'll hear more, is eco-spirituality and exploring reverent practices. And you told me that you are beginning a book about eco-spirituality, and it's one of your big passions right now. So perhaps you can tell us a little bit about it or about this principle. Well,
Craig and I have started talking about this and beginning to write about it. The whole idea that almost every human culture has some kind of spirituality, and they hold some things sacred. And it's really important that we find things within the rest of nature that we do believe are very sacred and need special care. And I think for a lot of us, too, who aren't necessarily from any particular religion, that the closest we get to a feeling of deep spirituality is often when we're in nature. And there's that feeling of awe and a gratitude when you're in an amazing place or you go through an amazing experience with an animal or a plant or something like that. And that's really powerful. And I think we're going to need that spiritual connection. And I'm not necessarily talking about anything to do with religion, although sometimes, they can connect. But I'm really talking about that sense of the sacred in nature that inspires us to protect the rest of nature. And, that's a lot of people talk about how that time in nature is the deepest spirituality that they do experience.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing how you put that all together, and that's what I have seen with my students, all different, cultures, races, spiritualities, that when we go out and, have different experiences in nature, that there's a heightened level of sacredness that is, even with folks that consider themselves, atheists, or agnostics, whatever you want, those two areas, it's just hard to not feel some sacredness in being in different places outside, or, when you tune in on that really mindful inner level. And so I really am glad you're going to be writing more about it and bringing it into the field. Yeah. So anything else you want to say about that before we go on to some questions and answers?
No, I'm looking forward to hearing from people and hearing what their thoughts are.
Mm-hmm. Me too, yes. So I just want to put the plug in for next month, February 8th at 6 p.m. It's a Monday night. I'm going to be interviewing Craig Chalquist, who also co-edited the Ecotherapy book with Linda, and as you've heard, is in many other projects that she is involved in. So that should be a wonderful webinar, and he is going to give us some statistics of latest research in the field that Linda had mentioned. He's got a finger on lots of the upcoming and already just completed research. So that I will send out, different marketing things that you'll see. That is, and it's also in your confirmation letter. It should be in there. So be all the information to tune into that. So on the slide, you see how you can get a hold of us. They don't have the technology yet, obviously, to just click and go to these sites, but hopefully you can copy some of those down or just Google us if you want to find out more of how to, what we're up to and all that. So now I'm going to go to the phones and the written-in information. First, I'm going to do the written ones, and then I'm going to go to the phone lines. So hopefully you can all stay another 5 or 10 minutes and hear some of the dialogue back and forth. Linda will have the first crack at answering the questions. I'll answer if we don't have too many. And let's see what we have. And I really am happy that so many of you were here today and got to experience this and be with us. So here is a first question from Stephanie Fagliano from San Francisco. She says, where does wilderness therapy fit into the larger field of ecotherapy? And what is the benefit for a therapist to attain an additional degree or certification in ecopsychology in order to integrate nature into clinical work? Okay, so those are two separate questions. Do you want to answer the first one first, Linda?
I think wilderness therapy is really important. Obviously, not every ecotherapist chooses that particular modality, but for those, especially those who are well experienced themselves and have that special training, that's a very powerful form of ecotherapy. Mm-hmm. And, I think just like any field, we're going to find some subspecialties that start opening up within ecotherapy, and I think wilderness therapy, equine-assisted therapy, and a lot of different modalities are going to become extremely important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my understanding is that, wilderness therapy is one of the many modalities under the umbrella of ecotherapy, and that, there's so many aspects of it that are so phenomenally impacting and powerful. And, I know people go on rites of passage, wilderness quests and vision quests for different transitions in their lives, and people go on them just as a deepening spiritual practice. So I agree with you that it's just such an important piece, and many people, for different reasons, aren't able to or kind of aligned with that. So everyone will need to find what's most important for them. So let's go to the next question of Stephanie's. What's the benefit for a therapist to obtain an additional degree or certification to integrate nature into clinical work? Linda, you want to answer that first?
I think people with a number of different trainings are beginning to do this kind of work. Sometimes they want a full therapy training and sometimes not. There are coaches, there are wilderness guides, there are public health people, there's parks and recreation people. I mean, I'm certainly an advocate of all of us getting as deep training as we can. And I think as more of us specialize, we're going to become aware of what we're missing and what we need to get. The only thing I really emphasize to people is if you're going to do outdoor therapy, especially wilderness therapy, that you get some additional training in outdoor first aid.
Yeah. I'll answer that, Stephanie. I think there's all different levels of what you need as a therapist to, to feel like you can practice the work. And if you're doing, like what I do is I take people out into the Oakland Hill parks. So some of my clients just do outdoor work with me, and some do a combination of indoor and outdoor. And there was a learning curve there. There was a lot of things I didn't know in the beginning, and I definitely made mistakes that I wouldn't do again. And I got some training, and I did a lot more reading, and I got more coaching, and I got, when I got more education, I felt more relaxed. I felt more like I could support the clinical space. The work went deeper. I felt more, just more, I had more clinical guidelines, so I felt more secure in the work. And so I don't think you necessarily need to get a whole nother degree, but there's, various programs. Linda's, mine, there's other ones that you can get that can fill in some of the pieces so you feel confident and, that you're that you feel like you're doing appropriate work within your scope of practice. Yeah, that's what I was looking for. It's getting late for me here. So I hope that's helpful. If you want to have any more questions, for these ones that we've answered, you can email either of us and we can, talk to you more. So we have one more written question, and then I'm going to go on to the folks on the phone. So Veronica from Florida says she's an ecopsychology student, and she's wondering how to implement what she's learned in the work field, where or how to start. So, Linda, you want to take the first at that?
Well, I think I'd probably need to ask a few questions to know how that might happen, and to find out if she's already seeing clients indoors, and or if she's already seeing clients outdoors. And there's certainly a lot of things, as you said, to keep in mind in both areas. So some special training in ecotherapy, in addition to the ecopsychology training, might actually be very helpful.
Yeah, I have the same question to her, is that it depends on, what your training is and where you're getting overwhelmed and what you're feeling like you're missing. Do you need community to kind of get, do you need consultation? Would you like, like people that are in all different kinds of, modalities, like COMI and EMDR and such, they have groups that support each other along the way as they're integrating all this. So I would encourage you to either, try to get together with some other folks that are doing this, or I have an ongoing online group. There's possibly other places to kind of get the daily integration that you'd want with any other kind of specialty, right? So, so give us a call and maybe we can, help point you in a direction that would be helpful. But definitely go for it because, it's not that hard to get started. It just might take a little bit of a little more support along the way. So I know it's 7. We have a couple more minutes that we can each stay, and we have several folks still on the phone. So I'm going to open up the phone lines, and if any of you on the phones want to speak, you can raise your hand. You push *2 on your phone to raise your hand, and then I will unmute you, and then you just talk. So please talk to us. So let's see who has want to raise their hand, and I'll also go back and check if someone wants to write anything else down that I missed. So no question is a bad question. All questions are good because this is exactly the forum to talk about this. Oh, and Veronica, she replied to us that she's not seeing clients yet. So I'm going back to the phones. Okay. Folks, where are you? Okay, do not see any hands raised. So again, let me tell you how to do it, and please don't be shy. You don't have to tell us your name if you wanted to stay anonymous. So you press *2, and then it'll show me that your hand is raised, and then we will talk to you. No, I don't see anybody yet. I know that when I was first starting to do these webinars and we had to raise our hand, it was so weird, it's kind of uncomfortable. So if you're having that experience, but you really have a question you'd like to ask, I encourage you to just try it. Okay, I'll give it another minute. So Linda, anything else you want to say while we're waiting to see if anyone has a little more courage to ask a question? Anything else that we didn't cover that you'd like to say, or anything in conclusion?
Well, I just wanted to mention a couple of things people can do People can email me at lindabuzzell@gmail.com, and I can add you to a Google email list for the International Association for Ecotherapy. So sometimes people have discussions there, or we post things that might be of interest. And also the association has a Facebook group called Ecotherapy Network, and the same thing happens there where people have questions, whether they're students or they're practitioners. You can post something there, and often you get really good answers. There's a lot of good people in both of those places.
Mm-hmm. I would also add the Ecopsychology Facebook group. It's got so much going on every single day. There's many different dialogues going on, so there's definitely a lot of support and dynamism there. And also, I'm sure you probably already have my email, but I'll give it to you as well, Ariana, ARIANA, CA @sbcglobal.net. So definitely give me an email if you have any questions or want to know more about anything we spoke about. And I am not seeing any more hands up. So going once, going twice. I'm going to look last time on the questions written in. We have one more question or statement. Oh, I see. Okay, here we go. Thank you. Okay, there's a bunch more questions. So someone says, Marilyn Schultze. Hello, Marilyn. Nice to hear you out there again. Any ideas for bringing ecotherapy into the locked hospital setting? I like that. Linda?
I missed that last part. What was the
locked hospital setting? I actually have an idea.
Okay, well, go for it, Ariane.
Yeah, since I've done a lot of indoor work with people, and I'm not quite sure what the locked reason is. Maybe it's psychiatric, not sure. But you can bring in postcards of pieces of nature, pictures, natural pieces. You can bring in stories about the environment. You can bring in sounds, like a sound machine that has sounds. You can bring in, stones. You can bring in different herbs that kind of evoke, lavender, mint, different flower smells. All of these can give people some connection to the natural world, and they might kind of help bring them more liveliness, because when we get in our senses and our sensual bodies and wake up our senses, that wakes up some aliveness. I'm not quite sure, again, what your hospital setting is, but all of those are ideas. I have a whole webinar about indoor ecotherapy. We can talk about that if you want. Give me an email. Anything to add, Linda?
Yes, I wanted to make sure we mentioned therapy animals, because the research supporting animal-assisted therapy is very strong, and this is actually becoming quite accepted in many medical situations.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I've seen that a lot, and there's lots of books, and again, I have a webinar on animal-assisted therapy, how to get started. So that could definitely work. And some people, you can get them, they've already trained, their dogs are trained, or their cats are trained, they can come in for you. So we have one more thing. Someone's asking if the webcast will be available to view online at a later date. I will send something around tomorrow with a replay URL, so you'll have that. And Veronica from Lakewood, she says she has a question about no microphone. So if you want to type it in the next 30 seconds, 1 minute, we can answer you. And then a person from Ottawa, hello, he or she says, Mike Cohen, Project Nature Connect is worth mentioning. Linda, do you have anything to say about Mike? I know he's been around for a long time.
He has. He's one of the pioneers in training people in ecotherapy. Mm-hmm. So definitely good to check him out. And there's also programs at Prescott, at Naropa University, at Lewis and Clark in the Northwest. There's a number of different programs now that provide some really good training.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can, Prescott, did you say? I didn't quite hear. We have a couple more questions. This is great. Thank you, everyone. I was thinking we were done, but okay, here's Veronica. Would you suggest an ecotherapy degree or an ecopsychology degree if one already carries a clinical license? So my answer to that would be that you don't necessarily need a degree. I would suggest a certificate, though. It depends on how much learning and how skilled you want to be. I mean, I think you can practice and do a lot of ecotherapy work without having a whole degree. What do you think, Linda?
I agree with that. I think a certificate is the way to go if you're already licensed. If you want to get deeper into the academic study of ecopsychology, then definitely you might want to consider an MA, a PhD, whatever that would fit for you. I teach in a program that's a depth psychology PhD with a specialty in community psychology and liberation psychology and eco-psychology. So that's if you're interested in really getting deeper into it and perhaps even becoming a teacher or a professor in the field or an author.
Yeah, thanks, Linda. Yeah, there are, in-depth programs out there that you already mentioned and probably more that we haven't even mentioned. But, yeah, that's always a way to go. And I guess, from my perspective is, the work needs to be done now. It's happening. Go for it. Get a little more training, get a certificate, and, get a support group, get some kind of an ongoing community, and it can happen sooner than a whole degree, but you have to make your choices of what feels right to you. Someone else, Linda, you have another 2 minutes to answer the last two questions?
I do.
Okay, great. So someone else, they are nameless, says, are there any efforts to create a professional conference for ecotherapists? Oh, my goodness. I would sure love that in the United States. We don't have that yet unless you know of anything I don't know of, Linda. What do you have to say?
Well, I thought what they did in the UK at the University of Brighton was wonderful. They had an ecotherapy symposium, and I was able to participate via Skype and be one of the keynote speakers, and there were a lot of people, obviously, who were there in person, and I would love to see something like that happen here in the U.S. as well.
Yeah, I really think that we are way overdue, and it's just a matter of who and how, and I think it's going to happen. Holos Institute used to do kind of mini conferences, just a day long. It's not necessarily an ongoing thing right now, as far as I know. But keep in touch with us. Whoever asked that question, get on our mailing list, and that would be something. We would definitely promote and let people know. And I think once that starts happening, professional conferences, it's going to take off even further. I think it's really needed. So I hope that happens. So the last question is actually just a comment. So let me see if I need to answer it. Yeah, Melody, if you're still out there, I will email you about that. So I will get back to you. And I want to conclude this gathering here by, again, appreciating everyone for making the time, valuing this work, finding out about it, and participating. Wonderful questions. And we will hope to see you. I hope to see you again in a month, and hopefully the next 4 months I'll have these. And Linda, I so appreciate all your wisdom, all your knowledge, all your work in the field, and everything you're doing, because you're definitely one of my mentors. So thank you, and thank you for being here with all of us.
Oh, thank you, and thank you for putting this on. It's wonderful.
Welcome. My pleasure. So we will say goodbye to everyone. I wish you a wonderful New Year's season, and may you all go and take the next step in what is your heart and spirit and your passion is saying about how to take care of the earth, how to spread this work. And I wish you well and hope to see you again. So goodbye.